Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Coast-to-Coast Combat Hour. I'm your host, Matthew Hawkins, and as always, joined by Ed Carbajal. We are brought to you weekly by AllAccessMMA.com. Check us out at www.allaccessmma.com for our video podcast. Ed, there is a
Whew.
UFC fight night this week, but we figure in the world of MMA podcast, 99% will be talking about the UFC. So we'll let everybody know that it is Font versus Vera on Saturday. A couple
Should
good
be a
fights,
fun one.
some
Yeah.
exciting guys, but check your local listing. It is on ESPN, ESPN2. But with all the stuff from last week outside the UFC and all the stuff coming up,
And all the news today and all the stuff coming up and the boxing and MMA and all the craziness. We got so much to talk about. We'll talk about what other folks are not talking about.
let's quickly jump back to last week then. We had Jillian DeCourcy on, so we didn't get a chance to kind of preview what was up and coming. I did mention there was a Thursday night BKFC card.
Mm-hmm.
Frank Tate took that main event with a quick knockout of Joey Beltran in the main event. Beltran went down hard, hitting his head off the canvas. Luckily, he recovered. Seems to be well, but scary moment, along with some other really brutal classic BKFC fights. So if you have the ability to go back and watch that, if you missed it, definitely worth the watch. Friday night, Bellator, first of Bellator in Hawaii, the one bigger MMA organization that ventures out to the islands to put on some really cool shows. They always seem to be a little bit cursed, or something always seems to happen with Bellator to kind of throw a monkey wrench in a good night. But Friday night, Juliana Velasquez, Liz Carmouche, women's flyweight championship bout. If you saw it, you probably certainly have a opinion on the stoppage by referee Beltran. Um,
Yeah.
I'll let you go first, and I'll see
Well,
if
I
I
mean,
concur.
here's the thing. Here's the thing with that. I mean, uh, it sucks because Liz Carmouche has been. I mean, first of all, it was like their first responders military thing on Friday night, which Liz Carmouche falls in the category. She's a former Marine herself. I think it's Marine Corps that she was in.
Uh-huh.
Um, she's been at it for a while. She's gotten to a lot of opportunities to win titles and has come up short. If you remember, her first fight in the UFC was against Ronda Rousey for the inaugural women's bantamweight title. And I mean, there was points where she could have won that, and she didn't. And then obviously Rousey did what she did back then. So it sucks that she won this way because it kind of dampers the moment for her. And post fight press conference, Scott Coker said that that's definitely something he's considering running back because of how it ended. But I mean, I can't think of and Patricio Pitbull too also said had criticism over Mike Beltran stoppaging and stopping the fight the way it was stopped. But I don't see what was going to happen from that position. So as I watch it again, and I watched it again this morning because I'm writing something about it in the newsletter that I do. I'm actually including the finish of the clip. Like with the time left in the round and the position that she was in, you know, I mean, yeah, it's a championship fight, so I guess you let her sit there and take elbows if she's still fighting back. But you know, you know, that's us sitting at home watching. Beltran sees that and is probably like, I got to save this girl. So I don't
Yeah,
know, man.
it's hard. I think Mike Beltran is definitely one of the top
Mm-hmm.
referees in the industry. So this was the first time that I can recall. Now the Pitbull thing's weird because I didn't really know there was much controversy. I thought he got blasted by McKee, guillotined, and maybe he didn't tap, but it just I didn't realize there was much controversy, but apparently there was some there. But this one I thought was a terrible stoppage. I thought
Mm-hmm.
A, it was a championship fight. I thought B, of the, let's say, 12 elbows that were thrown, I thought maybe only three of them really landed
Mm-hmm.
with kind of any kind of damage or any kind of force in reality at all. Um, and we're a podcast, and I hate to think of stuff. I don't think it was a good idea. I'll just say that now. This is hindsight 2020. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think it was a good idea to necessarily have a former Marine refereeing a Marine in
Mm. I
you
didn't
know
even think about that. And they should they showed
and
a
they
whole promo too, and that didn't hit me.
correct. And
Yeah.
I don't want to. I guess I am in a sense saying as a conspiracy theorist because I don't believe there was any kind of shenanigans behind the scenes or even thought of. But but it to me, it's just not the best look in the world. And I would understand why Juliana Velasquez would be frustrated at how it stopped. It was a championship fight. I felt like you
Interesting.
can't. The clock is true what you say. Maybe she was never going to get out of that, but we can't anticipate that. That's not the referee's job. That could be our job. We're a couple schmoes doing a podcast,
Yeah.
But not the referee shouldn't necessarily believe that. And I don't know what I think in his mind he thought that like the elbows were hitting hard and he made a bad stoppage.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think it was more than that. I just from somebody like
Yeah.
me going the optics don't look good and I kind of thought that
I don't know. I don't want to. Like I know there's folks that are quick to jump on the bandwagon of knocking an official, and if they suck at it, I'm all for it. Like I can't stand Yamasaki and a couple other referees out there, Jaron Villel, that are ones that I think will are probably more dangerous than safe for the sport. But Mike Beltran's not one of them. Mike Beltran is one of those guys that I'm like oh, good. Mike Beltran's reffing that fight. Thank God, like.
Yeah, let's
So,
make that perfectly clear.
yeah.
I believe he's probably one of the top 3 or 4 referees in
Mm-hmm.
the world. Um,
And there's
and
something to be said too for. I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but
yeah,
there's something to be said too because I remember I knew we were going to talk about this, and I had it in my head because I mentioned Yamasaki and Valel and all those guys. I mean, I remember. I think it's a Bloody Elbow article that has the interview where he's asked. Yamasaki is asked one of the reasons why we don't see him in the UFC and stuff anymore if he still trains, and he admits that he hasn't trained in years. And it's like, okay, well, then why are you? Because I know for a fact, Chris Lieben, who just went through everything he went through, he's already back in the gym. There's something about being involved in the sport that you're like. We all know Herb Dean does a certain amount of training. Mike Beltran definitely still trains. I know he coaches
Herb Dean
fighters.
used to fight in King of the Cage. I mean, I don't,
Yeah, so
he's went into the cage a couple times. So
yeah, and I know he's still like just for his own because it's when you pick martial arts as your go-to physical activity, it's something you're always going to do. People see George St. Pierre work out all the time. They think he's coming back, but that's what he likes to do for exercise. So I think there's something to be said for officials, whether they be judges, referees. Their eye is better for the sport than those that are kind of just armchair in it, quarterbacking it or whatever from the cheap seats. So I think there's something to be said for that, and that's kind of why I'm like, Coker's willing to run it back again. Someone else that's trained in martial arts for a good portion of his life. The fact that he says that, I mean, I doubt Carmouche and Velasquez would be against a rematch. But we'll see what happens there, man. But yeah, I just had to get that out there because like you said, I mean, Mike Beltran's definitely one of the referees. Like, I'm happy when I see he's reffing.
Yeah, and he's done a ton of stuff in California. I mean, I think I probably saw Mike Beltran referee before the world did on TV and stuff. So like I said, it was one of those things where it's like maybe it wasn't in hindsight but that's discrediting Beltran. So it really, I mean, I don't even really feel great bringing it up. It was just something that popped through my mind as I saw it unfold, because initially I thought it was just a completely terrible stoppage. I watched the replay. A couple of the elbows did hit well, but I just thought it was a bad stoppage. I thought it was probably his worst in a higher profile fight. Maybe he'd admit that too. I don't know. I don't know if he commented on it. And honestly, I don't care if he does or not. He doesn't owe anybody anything for, as we said, he being an outstanding official for as long as he has. So move on from that. They did have their alternate bouts. Enrique Barzola and Danny Sabatello advanced into the Grand Prix, Bantamweight Grand Prix.
I didn't like seeing Jornal Lugo lose, but I mean, that was definitely if anyone.
Sabatello's bad, man. He might be a dark horse in this tournament. I mean, he's got wrestling.
I mean, he's calling out Leandro Higo in his post-fight press conference. I mean, he's already got a gimmick because he dropped like 8,000 F-bombs between on fight week alone.
Yeah, no,
So,
I think he could be a dark horse,
mhm,
and I'm actually leaning picking him against Higo at this point. But we'll have to see how things shape up over the next several weeks while they
mhm,
prepare for the prepare to get that round of the brackets of the Grand Prix
yeah,
going. Saturday night, the next night there in Hawaii for Bellator. Headline Chris Cyborg, Arlene Blencowe. We did mention that last week, and then they got the some of the other bouts for the tournament kicked off.
mhm,
Just jumping right to the main event. First, hats off to Arlene Blencowe for surviving 5 rounds and
yeah,
surviving some really really tough situations early in that fight. Cyborg fought a really smart fight, did her thing. Uh, just
yeah.
it was. I think it was more of a better example of Arlene Blencowe than obviously their first fight. So,
Hey,
uh, you know,
I've had the pleasure of speaking with her multiple times. Interviewed her before the first time they fought. Interviewed her before the Friday before. We spoke that Friday before she flew out to Hawaii. Um, I'll drop a link to the interview on the bottom of this description when we're done with this, if you guys want to see it, because there's a big difference. We're at a different point. The first time there was a pandemic, she was away from home for a long time. Um, Blanco, I'm talking about. So she got finished the first time against Cyborg. She nearly got finished this time. But I think there's something to be said for having a positive support system around you, because there was points in that fight that I thought she was going to turn it around, especially when they got into the championship rounds. And then at the end, when she did the pull the Max Holloway and pointed to the ground and was like, "Let's fucking go right here." And even still, not for nothing, she's still going nuts over there in Hawaii. I mean, she's legit, they hugged and stuff. I mean, I think Cyborg definitely respects her. If for some reason it happens again, because she hasn't lost her spot. She's just still a number one ranked as of yesterday. I wrote about it over at my MMA News. She's still the number one ranked featherweight woman in Bellator. She didn't lose her spot. She actually jumped up in their pound for pound rankings because of how she did in that fight. And she's still over there like on cloud nine. And she actually said, and I wrote in the article I wrote, I quoted it. She said she's fine if she's got to be the gatekeeper. Then nobody's going to get to Cyborg without getting through her first. And I thought that's probably the coolest thing. That's one of the coolest things I've ever seen, and at least in women's MMA. I mean, you get to the show twice and you lose. They usually say best 2 out of 3, so that's 2 already out of the way. I mean, I don't mind that if that's the thing, but the way this fight happened, if something again happens that we get Cyborg Blencowe 3, I'm all in for it.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think for the longevity of her career, it'd be ideal to hopefully if that next fight doesn't happen too soon. But yeah, no, I think that's an outstanding attitude, and I think that just proves a maturity and that's being a prize fighter.
Mm-hmm.
That's being a fighter, going out there there's no shame when you watch this sport year rounded long enough and you see what goes into what these people put their bodies through and stuff. There's no
Mm-hmm.
shame in losing to Chris Cyborg. I mean, we're talking a once
No,
in I don't want to say once, a handful of great women that have competed in this sport,
I
and
mean,
and
like they
she's
call her the Grand Slam champion. She's held all the titles.
yeah, and you can argue her or Nunez. I mean, but that's basically what we're down to. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
as far as the heavier weight classes, we can argue, we can talk, Valentina and Rose and where they
Yeah.
fit into that. But I mean, Cyborg's been around the longest and continuing to put on
Mm-hmm.
a show and just
Yeah.
getting better and better. I mean, she's
I
not.
mean, look,
But
she's already gone through the list of. If you look at she's going through the list, and it was supposed to be Sinead Kavanaugh again. She's supposed to fight her again. So Kavanaugh's injured. She had the ACL, the LCL surgery, and then this fight happened because Blencowe's number one. Blencowe's still number one. I mean, if you look at my interview with Blencowe and the stuff that's coming out after Cyborg has a boxing option to do a super fight, because what else is there for her to do, and both of them are coming to the end of their careers. If you look my interview with Blencowe, she says the same thing. She was looking to she didn't think she was going to go be back in the Bellator cage before this soon, maybe towards the end of the year. She was looking at going back to boxing herself, and then there was the Kayla Harrison chatter before that got shut down. So they were both already looking kind of like for this to not happen, and I think if the way it happened just worked out great. But what happens next, man? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I honestly, the way they were talking about boxing at the post-fight media scrum, I feel like I wouldn't be surprised if we get some Chris Cyborg boxing news against somebody of note.
I mean, it's almost got to be something at this point. If we can't
Yeah.
cross promote, then she's going to have to go outside the box
Mm-hmm.
to challenge herself at
Yeah.
this point. Um, Other fights that night, new interim bantamweight champion Ruffian Stotts finished Juan Archuleta with the head kick
Mm-hmm.
TKO. Star in the making. I'm not a big fan of this interim thing, especially after seeing it, especially because I didn't think it was necessary.
Yeah.
I thought the Grand Prix could have moved on just
Yeah.
fine. Like
Like
it was
what?
out. Like I didn't
Yeah.
even expect the belt. The belt didn't pop into my mind until all of a sudden they threw it on,
I
and
mean,
I'm
and
going
shout
like,
out to Grabaka Hitman for putting that out when they made the announcement. They were like, "Why just make the winner of the tournament fight Sergio Pettis? He's going to be out so long. Like,
yeah,
well,
and
why does it's not necessary."
it wasn't needed. But Stotts is a fun, cool fighter. If it helps
Mm-hmm.
him make any more money, or if he heck wear that belt all day long, more power to you.
Yeah.
It seemed weird to me that it didn't seem necessary because it was a great fight. Didn't need to have the interim belt handed over. Didn't just But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we didn't get a chance to do picks. I'm not even sure how I would have picked that fight. I'm a big fan of Juan Archuleta, but and it was a good
Mm.
fight. It was a good back and forth. It was a good
I'm glad
fight
we
until
didn't do picks. Now that you say that, I'm glad we didn't do picks. So that's definitely that was beforehand. That was a hard one because I like
No,
them
it's a
both
great
too.
fight on
Yeah.
paper. It's an outstanding fight, and
Yeah.
it's maybe we see it again down the line at some point
Yeah.
because both guys still have plenty of time to fight. The other quarterfinal, Patchy Mix defeated Kyoji Horiguchi. Uh, you know, I, I'm glad again we didn't do picks. I would have picked Horiguchi to win this fight.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea the size discrepancy. When I saw them face each other in the middle of the ring right before the fight started,
Yeah.
I kind of at that point knew that this is going to be a rough night. And I'm Mr. Open Weight. Let's
Mm-hmm.
but it just it seemed odd, and I don't know what they were actually weighing fight night, and maybe they weighed the same. Maybe Horiguchi's just solid and carries the weight differently, but it looked like three different weight classes almost. It looked like a welterweight fighting a bantamweight.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to me, when they faced off, and maybe I'm exaggerating, but it definitely looked like there was a difference, I feel like we noticed it because there wasn't a ton of damage done. Mix took his back a bunch of times, was able to control him on the ground, but it was really just
Mm-hmm.
body triangles. And maybe you can add to this, but I would imagine being bigger, especially like a foot taller, and you know, who
Well,
knows?
yeah, Mix is actually a pretty lanky dude too. I mean, when I talked to him when they were in New York and he did his first fight out here in New York, he was very soft spoken or whatever. I mean, he was kind of newish to Bellator back then. But I remember I'm 5'11", and they're fighting at 135. I'm like 200. Well, you know,
Yeah,
I'm my COVID weight. I'm 210 right now, but 210, 215. But you know what I mean? Like the, he still was, his frame was so much larger than mine that I could only imagine, like, having been close to both those men. That, I mean, when you fight somebody of that frame, especially when it comes to ground or wrestling and stuff like that, that's a lot of extra body you got to deal with.
yeah. Especially I imagine with that body triangle, he just
Mhm.
cinches it on, and he can kind of
Yeah,
really get a good grip. He's not really fighting to get it; he just wraps it up, and
yeah,
and that was
and
I
it's
mean,
harder to get the leverage to get out of something like that with someone built like that. I mean, here's a great example of the opposite. I mean, unless you have superior skill against someone with that body type, look at Galval versus DeRitter in their grappling match. Galval couldn't submit him; he was attacking the whole time, but he also had a very hard time, getting to the positions he got to because of the difference in frame. So that's a really good point.
Fight of note that night, and he just signed a long-term contract. Apparently, Yancy Medeiros, Emmanuel Sanchez, outstanding back and forth battle.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, that was
fight of the night for sure for Bellator that
a great
night.
weekend for them. Yeah.
Upset alert: Justine Kish upsets Elimile McFarlane, really dominating her for all 3 rounds, picking up a decision. Um, and overall probably a successful week. The stoppage on Friday night kind of threw everything a little bit
Hmm.
off for me. I'm not but it made it weird. It made it a little bit. It would have been
Yeah.
nice to see that play out and see how that would have went, because it really
No.
would have
Yeah.
added 2 nights of action.
It does
uh,
make it weird, like you said, because it's like I was saying, alluding to earlier, the fact that that's the first title that Carmouche wins has to have that attached to it. It fucks it up a
it's
little
not
bit
fair
for
to
him. Yeah.
her, but congrats to her again. And there's no disrespect to Liz Carmouche or Patchy Mix. Both of them
I do have some
biggest
disrespect
wins.
for the media that was in attendance.
Go
Freaking
ahead.
Scott Coker. Scott Coker says in LA he's going to meet with Nobuyuki Sakakibara about Ryzen, making plans with Ryzen, and nobody fucking asks him about it. I mean, he brings it up when they brought up Horiguchi, he brought it up. Like, okay, we're going to try to do something before the end of the year, likely December, Horiguchi related, with fighters from the Ryzen roster or fighters from Japan. But it's like, that was all we heard. He let it be known, and nobody fucking followed up about it. And I mean, not for nothing, I could have followed up about it, but the time difference, I wasn't trying to zoom into that thing to ask any questions. The time difference between there and there, I mean, that event was over like at fucking 2 a.m. over here.
Yeah.
So I was just like, oh man. But when I saw the scrum, I was like, oh, I should have, just for that, I should have chimed in to ask, because I really wanted to know about it. But I mean, he said it to there's some Japanese outlet called Unext that was in Hawaii. He said at the post fight media scrum, Coker, but he also said it to them that they're going to try to do something with Horiguchi in Japan, likely in December. So I mean, to me that says New Year's Eve Rising type of
Makes the
thing.
most sense.
Yeah.
Makes the most sense. I dream for a day where we get like WrestleMania 2, where we get like Bellator, New Year's Eve in the United States, that ends like 9 my time, 12 Eastern your time on New Year's Eve, and then it
Dude,
kicks right into a Ryzen show.
that's one of my fucking hiccups with the PFL. Like they pulled their shit out of New Year's Eve in New York, and for me I thought that was as close as we were gonna get, but there's a lot of news we still haven't gotten to yet,
There's
so maybe we'll
chance.
yeah
There's
yeah
chance. There's a
yeah
chance. So before we jump forward, I need to go back one more time. We should have talked about it prior, but last Wednesday was the PFL kicked off,
yeah. Talking
and I'm
about
not
PFL, yeah.
not going to go through the whole card, but the main event deserves note. Clay Colliard, Jeremy Stevens. Uh, without racking my brain, probably one of the top 5 fights of the year so far. I thought it was outstanding, back and
Mm,
forth, stand-up fight. Not a ground battle, but 2 guys going back and forth, throwing heavy leather. Both guys showing crazy chins,
mm-hmm.
and nonstop, really from bell to bell. So props to both those guys. Collard picks up the unanimous decision win, but and I thought he did win the fight, but just a great fight. So again, if maybe if you have ESPN Plus, you might be able to track that fight down.
I actually had it queued up on my DVR to rewatch it myself, because when that was happening, we were on with Jillian last week. We were doing the podcast, so I think I messaged you about me trying to catch up with the PFL from that weekend, and the good old ESPN with their prioritizing certain sports over MMA. I mean, I had to wait for some women's softball game to finish
I'm
before I
sure
could.
you patiently waited for that.
but
Oh man,
but yeah, no, I mean, not before we move on past that, I just want to say I feel like Clay Collard hasn't Clay Collard has shined the most in the Professional Fighters League. When you look at his combat sports career, I mean, we know he was in the UFC way back when, and then he went to box, and now he's in the PFL, and he won when people didn't expect him to win against Anthony Pettis, and then now he's made for last season. He made for a couple of very entertaining fights, and then you open the season with that. I mean, Clay Collard is definitely a face in the PFL.
Yeah, no, he's doing great. He's picked up a couple nice names for his resume. Names that if he would have picked up in the last 2 years in the
Hmm.
UFC, people would really be, talking about
Hmm.
moving up the ranks. So hopefully he gets the credit that is due, and for him, obviously that comes along with a $1 million paycheck at the end of the season if all goes well for him. But
Hmm.
that kicked their season off. They do continue it tomorrow night with an event. Um, so it looks like we got a couple weeks of PFL, you know, to round out all the way through, you know, April, May, and then we get a little break, and then we kick through June and July. So looks like they got a lot of action, typical tournament action, a lot of familiar names. Uh,
Yeah,
you know,
there's some pretty cool fights. So like the Antonio the shoe face Darce choke, that was a nice win. So lots of good highlights to look for there. Hopefully they put it on their radar and they do a better job of it because a lot of
y-
folks were.
yeah,
You
no, Carlos Jr., like you said, shoe face with the win.
Yeah.
They got to do a better job of promoting. We can rag on it forever, but seeing that they want to have a pay-per-view to end this Grand Prix or
Hmm.
these tournaments, I mean, if you're only getting 158,000 people on ESPN to watch, I'm not sure how many pay-per-view buys you would expect.
Hmm.
So we'll see if that holds to serve, but that doesn't mean they're not putting on good fights, and it's not fairly easily accessible for a fan. So uh, credit where credit is due. Speaking of fairly easily accessible and something that a lot of people have, it's a streaming service,
Hmm.
Amazon Prime streaming, which obviously comes along with the shipping and everything that comes along with Amazon Prime.
Prime
Well,
Video, yeah.
as you tweeted out earlier today, one fighting championship has signed a 5-year deal with Amazon Prime to stream. I think it was a minimum of like 12 events a year,
12
live
events. Yep, 12 live events.
live primetime events in United States time. So, uh, for somebody like me who really enjoys the one cards, but just
Mm.
honestly can't catch them because they're usually Friday mornings early for me, and got to work, and it's
Yeah.
just hard to catch. I don't miss them when they're on Saturdays, and especially when they have the TNT shows. So
Hmm.
for somebody who wants to follow them and wants to support them and likes their roster and is excited about guys like Durainer and these other guys that we've seen start to
Angela Lee,
yep,
Randy Ritter. I mean, you
all
got
of them
Mighty
plus
Mouse there,
and
yeah.
Alvarez and all those guys that I want to follow. This makes it as easy as can be for me, and no excuse now to miss one of their events. So
Listen, this is something that I mean, how you and I have bitched and complained about the paywalls and all the shit that we have to go through to watch this sport now, and now this is a move. One championship made a move that folks have been talking about. Like, why don't you try? I mean, there was even I remember you used to be able to buy. You probably remember this. I mean, because I used to share it on Twitter a lot, but because first of all, full disclosure for folks in the description, I'm a affiliate of One Championship for their merchandise and of Amazon. Um, so the links are if you want to subscribe to Watch One Championship, all the links and buy some shirts and shit. All the links are below in the description of the audio and video versions of the podcast. But we've been hearing talk about why doesn't the UFC, because you used to be able to buy UFC pay-per-views through Amazon, and they didn't want to go that route because they went the ESPN route. So now Amazon obviously has been interested, and there's an interesting quote that I want to say because I wouldn't be surprised if they add to that content. I want to bring up the press release actually now that we're talking about it. But there is this is something that we've all been kind of like um saying someone should go to Netflix, because most people you definitely have Amazon. Most people either have both Netflix and Amazon Prime, which includes a Prime Video membership, like you just said. So we've been saying that for a while. If any MMA promotion went there, it'd probably be better to grab some newer eyeballs, especially when you look at what their demographic. Netflix likes to do weird shit, so I wouldn't be surprised if like Karate Combat or someone popped up there, um, because now everyone's looking for a streaming partner. But here's the thing with One Championship. I want to read the quote from the partner at the vice president of over at from the Amazon side. So let me bring up the the press release so you guys can see it for the folks that are watching this on our YouTube channel. Here we go. So here's a press release, one in Prime Video. So Marie Donahue, she's the vice president of global sports video at Amazon. Right here, she says, "One Championship shares our mutual commitment to elevate female athletes, boasting 5 reigning female world champions." So why does that stand out to me? Because Invicta FC, like one just did 156, they've done a couple of events exclusive to YouTube. Invicta's doing that now too. We had Jillian on last week, and that they're doing it again May 11th for Invicta FC 47. So I'm just spitballing here. It's not like confirmed or news or anything, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Amazon really wants to double down on combat sports and Invicta winds up on Prime as well. Just because the fact that Marie Donahue said that, I mean, you want to elevate female athletes, Invicta's all about female athletes. Like, that's all they are. So, I mean,
it
take
sounds
that for
good
what
to me. Like I said, we've complained a million times about these paywalls and stuff, but these are existing paywalls. The biggest complaint that I've had is like creating a new paywall. Like, people already have this. People might not subscribe that don't already have it, but you're talking a lot of people, that millions and millions of people that already do. So you've already got a built-in, fit crowd there. Not necessarily even a fan base, but just a crowd. I think it's a great move, and I just think it's a great move. I having the times and everything, it just works out. It just works out good, and it's just more good MMA and Muay Thai, and I mean, they got some stuff that they can really
submission of
introduce.
grappling. I love it all. I love it all, especially what they've been doing. Especially what they've been doing the last few events. I mean, if you liked what they did on TNT, which I did, I mean, I enjoyed them following AEW, and I was hoping that would have been a thing. And I know that before that was with Bleacher Report, but I wrote a whole thing on my newsletter too about MMA and YouTube and how it's been. We had Bobby Nash, the thing Bobby Nash was supposed to fight on, that was on YouTube, the Black Magic event. And now the last few Invicta cards, including the next one, YouTube exclusively. And now you're leading folks in to follow you. How many? I mean, it's easy to grab a lot of eyeballs there, right? And now with this happening, like you said, I mean, they're only going to do 12 events. So if they do that, plus keep doing stuff on their huge YouTube channel, because Chachi likes to talk about all his social numbers and all that. So it's like I feel like they're playing a really good game, and I love everything they're doing. And I don't know, man. I don't hate the UFC. I'm just glad to see that success can be found on other platforms for other promotions.
Yeah, and it's different. I mean, it's all MMA, but one isn't just all MMA.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, it's fighters and regions of fighters that we don't get fully exposed to necessarily with the UFC. UFC can only have so many fighters, and naturally, the largest amount of them are probably going to be American fighters, based that they're an American-based company. So we're going to get the international flavor that has always been a big part of MMA, but has had at times disappeared for various reasons. So it's nice to see the availability for this, rather than having to go through a big pay-per-view paywall, for an event, or just waking up at 3 a.m. I mean, there was a time I did it every time, but times change,
Yeah. We get old. We can't be staying up late like that anymore.
It's a lot harder than it used to be, but I just think it's a great move. I think it's going to be big for ONE FC, and I think that
I don't get the haters. I don't get people hating on the news. Like, what the fuck is your problem? Like, seriously, like, there's people that are out there like, oh, what are they going to do on Amazon Prime? Like, it's like how about I mean, like we just said, you probably, there's people that fucking have it and aren't using it, don't know they have it.
Yeah,
it's just,
and the people who complain like that are just going to illegally stream it anyway. So you know what I mean? Like, you're not going to pay for it. You're just you're just kind of whiny. Like, we don't.
But they fall in line with the folks that talk like they'll attack Amazon and Jeff Bezos and stuff like that. but still order shit on Amazon. You know what I mean? It's like, shut
Well,
the fuck
yeah,
up
I mean,
already. Have fun. There's more fights. Let's have some fun.
the more fights, and even if you argue that it costs you money, what is Amazon Prime? $12.99 a month or something like that. I mean, I don't even know the exact price. I think you can get it cheaper if you pay for the whole year. The UFC is charging $81 a pay-per-view after the ESPN Plus thing. So there's
Yeah.
no real, it's a plus. Plus, as I talked
It's
to
a yeah.
Jillian about, how it's great that Invicta's on YouTube
Mhm.
right now, and if they're making revenue on that, then that's even better.
Mhm.
But ideally, as much as you want to support the organizations, at some point money has to come in, and generally that money has to be funneled through fans. People like us have to
Yeah.
support the organizations, which eventually you hope to funnel down, and good organizations and good promoters funnel some of that money down to their fighters, and others keep 90% of it. But that's just the world of MMA promoting. And speaking of promoters, and we didn't talk about it, we mentioned Joey Beltran losing. I'm not sure if you saw the news, but did you see where he was choking the morning of at breakfast, and David Feldman actually gave him the Heimlich maneuver? And
No.
apparently, yeah, yeah, you want to talk about saving a main event? That's how you do it. The other promoters need to take a lesson. Yeah, apparently he laughed during breakfast, got something lodged in his throat, and started to panic. And David Feldman, the owner, and or the not the owner anymore with the Triller deal, but the president of BKFC, had
Mhm.
apparently jumped across the table and was able to give him the Heimlich maneuver and dislodge whatever he had in his throat. So
I'm surprised that's not on the that didn't make a lot of news. Huh.
there wasn't a ton of news on it. I saw a little bit. I mainly caught it through Joey Beltran's Instagram, and it was actually a TMZ article. It
Oh
wasn't. I don't even
wow.
know. Yeah, so that I
The
cut it through
TMZ got it.
TMZ.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I want to give credit to Feldman A for saving a good man's life, but B
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
uh,
Former
you know saving
guest
the
of the
main event.
show.
That's how
Yeah.
you do it. That's how you do it. You make sure that main event goes through. But yeah, no, just to jump into that. Also, BKFC this weekend, so I'll transition into that. Uh, Big man event: Lorenzo Hunt versus Joe Riggs for the light heavyweight championship in Bellator, or not Bellator, in BKFC. Um, should be a great fight. Hunt's super technical for bare knuckle, and Joe Riggs has
Mhm.
broken some faces. So be interesting to see. We've mentioned it many times, but $4.99 I think a month right now. So speaking of good deals for combat sports. Also, before we wrap up, big female boxing bout this weekend, or big
Mhm.
boxing bout in general. Katie Taylor, Amanda Serrano. Taylor 20-0. Serrano comes into the bout at 42 1-1. The consensus number one and number two ranked women at their weight class, pound for pound, pretty much everything. So this is,
Mhm.
I mean, I don't think there's any question. Ticket sales are kind of proving it. Chatter's kind of proven it. This is the biggest bout in female boxing history, and one of the biggest bouts in Madison Square Garden history for any combat sport. So
Mhm. Yeah.
uh, should be
Especially
interesting.
since it's so
That's on the
rare these days in the garden.
yeah.
Not a lot of fighting going on inside the garden these days. Plenty outside if you just got to swing by there on the right time. But yeah, no, it's definitely one to look forward to. Serrano's probably bringing in a lot of tickets for the local fans, and all the boxing fans are probably coming in to see. All the hardcore boxing fans are want to see this mix up with her and Taylor. Co-promoted, Jake Paul is uh, Serrano's side for the promotion and stuff, and Eddie Hearn for Katie Taylor on the other side is being broadcast on the Zone, which is I don't with that we just had a whole conversation, but that's a whole other conversation. But I mean, really quick, and we're looking back at the weekend. We completely forgot to mention Tyson Fury's KO over Dylan White. I mean, uppercut from hell, out of nowhere, short uppercut, and I know there's folks that try to knock him about the little shove he gave afterwards, but I mean, he still didn't get up because of the uppercut. So let's leave that where it lays.
No, continuing to establish himself as one of the greatest heavyweights of all time, and definitely the most
Yeah.
dominant of his generation.
And if we get him versus Ngannou next, I mean, Ngannou's still recovering from his knee surgery, but hey, that'll be one that'll get people fired up. That's for sure. I feel like that'll level off or rival Mayweather and McGregor levels of ridiculousness. So
Yeah, hopefully. But
yeah.
the weird thing for me is it doesn't seem like the UFC is behind it. Now maybe they are allowing him. I mean, they do basically own you when you're in the UFC. So I'm not even,
Mhm.
I imagine unless Ngannou is just kind of going rogue, the UFC had to probably even okay him going into that ring, or they're not happy that he did. But it just, you mentioned McGregor and Mayweather. I mean, I just don't understand why not get behind it. I mean, Fury's a huge star. Mayweather was a huge star. You
Mhm.
got, I mean, in a straight boxing match, you'd have to be a lunatic not to pick Tyson Fury to win, just like you kind of
Well,
had to be one to
hey,
pick Mayweather, you
yeah.
know. So, it just seems like it would be especially if Ngannou's not happy with the UFC and he kind of wants out. Why wouldn't you just
Mhm.
cash in one big giant payday?
Yeah, do the same shit. Do what you did with McGregor. Make it do co-promote,
I
you
mean,
know.
it'd have to. It's a mystery to me why that doesn't happen. But yeah, so PFL, BKFC, boxing, lot of stuff going on this weekend. So plenty of stuff to catch. Uh, Fans can catch the show at Combat Hour on Twitter, Coast to Coast Combat Hour on Instagram. Follow me, Matthew Hawkins, at MMA Hawk 21 on Twitter and Instagram. Follow Ed at Carbazol on Twitter, Carbeerzol on Instagram, and Old Head Carb on Twitch. And as mentioned earlier, you can always catch us at allaccessmma.com for our video podcast and MMA news. Ed, a lot to talk about, a lot to look forward to. Look
Yeah.
forward to catching up again next week.
See you next week.
Have a good night.
Peace.